Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ricardo Mackenzie. I'm the chairperson of the Standing Committee on the Premier and Constitutional Matters. With me, I have my colleagues, Wasima Kamesh Ahmad, who's joining me on this committee, and Siraj, and also Lizette Kluter. The team will be managing this meeting with me. I'm going to give an opportunity for the members of the committee to introduce themselves, then the Premier and his team to introduce themselves, and then Nexus and their team to introduce themselves. Then I'll just give a quick introduction before we start this meeting. I'll hand over to the members of the committee or any member of the legislature to introduce themselves, please.
Good morning, Chairperson and Premier, all other colleagues. Wendy Philander.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon to the Premier and the Department, as well as other guests. I'm Regan Allen.
Chairperson, good afternoon, Premier, all the other members, guests from the department, and from the Nexus company. Thank you very much. It's Cameron Dugmore.
Thank you. I saw the Chief Whip of the Opposition Party earlier joining. Is she still here?
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pat Lecker, an alternate to this committee.
Thank you, Member Lecker. The Premier and his team.
Thank you very much, Chair and members. Good afternoon. Good to be with you. And so I just want to double check if the Director General is on. Harry Malele, yes, I can see he's on. I think then Henriette Robson is also on. I'm not sure if there's anybody else from the Premier's office. And then, of course, as you said, there's Nexus. And this is about the lifestyle audit, this first part. So I presume that Henriette probably or DG will introduce Nexus. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. And also good afternoon to the members. Thanks, Premier, for that. The presentation will be done primarily by Advocate Francois Labuschagne, that is Nexus. I just need to check, I think he's on the call. Chair, we also have Ruthven, who's responsible for our forensics team internally, and obviously Henriette, Premier already mentioned that she's responsible for corporate governance, and then there are people also from my own team, Robert and Nozi, that is actually supporting us in all of this. So that's the team from our side, Chair.
Okay. Can everybody just from the Department of the Premier, for the record, just introduce themselves, please?
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Henriette Robson. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members of the committee. My name is Ruthven van Rensburg, and I'm connected to Forensic Services.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. My name is Robert Shaw. I'm from the Office of the DG. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask our colleagues from Nexus just to introduce themselves so we know who's here?
Good afternoon, Chairperson, honourable members and Premier Wendy and his team. My name is Francois Labuschagne. I'm a Director of Nexus Forensic Services, and with me is Esti Labuschagne, one of my colleagues. Esti is not related to me.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Esti Labuschagne, as Advocate Labuschagne introduced me. Yeah, good afternoon.
Thank you. I presume you're in the same room, and that's where the echo comes from. So just when you present, if one can just mute themselves. Is that everybody from Nexus?
Indeed, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask our colleagues from the Public Service Commissioner to introduce their team. They're also here and joining us today, and they'll also be doing the second part of the presentation this afternoon. Mr. Hussain?
Good morning, Chair and colleagues. Good morning. My name is Leonardo Hussain, Public Service Commissioner for the Western Cape. I'll allow Mr. Rockman to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, all members and our colleagues from the Department of the Premier. Premier, good afternoon. Paul Rockman, Public Service Commission.
Thank you. Is that everybody has introduced themselves? If I didn't, by a show of hands, please introduce yourself. Nazipo, you can go.
Thank you very much, Chair. Nazipo Maolwana from the DG's office.
Thank you, Nazipo. It's always good to have you with us. Can I just give some guidelines on the meeting before we continue? All members and everyone to be muted at the beginning of the meeting to avoid any background noises. When members, if you want to flag a point of order, you can do so in the chat function. All videos and audios must be switched off to improve the quality of the connection. However, if you do speak, please put on your mic and of course your video as well. And once you finish speaking, please switch off your microphone. We're going to start with the first presentation, which is from Nexus Forensic Services. I'm first going to ask the Premier to make some introductory remarks, and after that, we'll hand over to Nexus for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. In actual fact, in this environment, it's almost a bit awkward because I myself am also part of the process of making my own records and myself available for a lifestyle audit. But of course, I also must carry the can and the responsibility. So it is actually a pleasure to be able to have Nexus here to say that we've not just spoken about it, we've completed it, and we've got a process underway where we now can say that we've done the first round of lifestyle audits. Also very happy that the results were as they were, and you'll see, obviously there were some things like dormant companies that we've had to address and go through processes to actually have them registered, etc., and some of the members, but that in actual fact the process actually has run off well, and it is a pleasure to be here, part of the process, but understand that I can't really lead the presentation because I myself am also subject to scrutiny through the process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Premier. And we're going to hand over to the Advocate Labaskachny and the colleague to lead us on the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation. If you just bear with me, I'm just going to put it up. Chair, can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Not yet.
Is it now available?
I can't see it yet. Can any other member see the presentation?
Nothing yet, Chair.
Nothing yet, Mr. Labaskachny?
Not yet, Chair.
Mr. Chair, just give me a moment. I think the system is a bit slow on our side.
There you are. I can see it. Members, can everyone else? Can you see the presentation?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Advocate Labaskachny. You can continue.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this lifestyle audit which we conducted was an audit on the Executive Council and their spouses. Now, I'm going to talk about basic four bases that were covered during the course of the investigation. First, I will deal with the scope and the mandate. Then I will deal with the methodology that we followed. I will then dive a little bit deeper into the findings and in the sense of the sources of these findings, and then I will come to the conclusions and recommendations at the end of the presentation. Now, first of all, just a very brief summary of the scope and the mandate. And this mandate entailed a comprehensive lifestyle audit and analysis of the business interests of the 11 members of the Executive Council, as well as their spouses and or life partners. The period under investigation is very important, being the 1st of June 2017 up to 31 May 2019. The aim or the goal of this lifestyle audit was to indicate whether the individual's lifestyle commensurate with their income, whether any other income was received, and if so, whether this could cause a possible conflict in their capacity as members of the executive, and lastly, whether any interest held by the members and or their spouses represent a potential conflict which may interfere with the duties as member of the executive. Now, let me first speak to the methodology that we followed, and it is very important given the relevance of the Protection of Personal Information Act that everyone understand the process that we had followed. First of all, we obtained consent forms filled in by all the members and their spouses with regards to the information obtained during the course of this review. We then followed that up with a questionnaire to the members and their spouses, and we requested several different pieces of information from financial information up to assets, be it fixed assets or movable assets, as well as all the supporting documentation pertaining to transactions, bank accounts, as well as these assets that were declared. Following that, we then conducted a exercise which we call a business intelligence search, and I will allude to that a little bit later, the so-called BIS as an acronym. From that, we conducted a net worth analysis pertaining to each and every individual, and where it was necessary, we posed clarifying questions and also conducted interviews where it was necessary. All of this was under the umbrella of confidentiality that remained intact throughout the process, as well as the custody and the control of these documentation provided to us were kept on secure platforms. I'm just going to lift my seat a little bit. So just to clarify a little bit the methodology, in order to detect a possible conflict, one has to look in totality to the BIS results, the financial information, as well as the analysis and then social media platforms that we had checked. Now, Chair, I'll briefly discuss the business analysis or the methodology pertaining to BIS. First of all, it starts with so-called CIPC searches, where one would look for different companies, entities, and relevant information pertaining to the members. The aim was to detect whether any of the members are involved with legal entities, and then to check that against Green Gazette to see whether any of these entities had done business with an organ of state. That was followed up by Windeed Spider reports. Now, Windeed provides you with information pertaining to properties, and I will allude to that a little bit more later on. We also checked on the database through eNatus, the Department of Transport, to verify movable assets in the form of vehicles, etc. Also, the Triceps reports would give you information about addresses, telephone numbers, etc. And then TransUnion credit bureaus to look for any debt, as well as then the internet and social media searches that were conducted. Now, all of this is the BIS analysis. Now, I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper to indicate as to what this analysis entailed. Now, on the CIP searches, provides you with a summary of directorships. It gives you status, appointment dates, and the company status of the particular entity. Now, on the director status, it gives you whether the person is an active director or whether he is a resigned director. And on the company status, whether the company is in business or deregistered. Now, deregistered does not necessarily mean that the company is closed. It just means that it could be deregistered in terms of a request, then the company ceased to exist, or it is deregistered because certain annual returns were not presented in time to the CIPC commissioner. On the e-notice part, there we check the registration numbers against ID numbers of the relevant people under investigations, and we detect then vehicle ownerships, and this also provides us with information pertaining to vehicles currently owned, the vehicle particulars, the type of status, as well as the date of acquisition or selling of the vehicle. From that, obviously, as one further on look at your financial information, you will then mirror the results from e-notice with your financial information to see whether those two are comparable. On the Windeed Spider reports, you get information from properties, the purchase dates, the values, mortgage details, the particular address, size and type, as well as a list of previous properties owned by the individual. Now, this is really important because one could find deposits into bank accounts from attorneys, etc., and that is then verified against the transaction of the particular property to see whether that time frame fits the transaction and the payments of these deposits. Again, on Triceps, you get your information from personal particulars, contact information, address details. In some instances, it provides you with contact details in the form of cell phone particulars, while TransUnion provides you with a credit bureau history on default judgments, outstanding judgments, notices, and inquiry history. Now, the inquiry history is, for instance, if a member wants to open a credit line at a bank, for instance, then the banks would do a credit check with TransUnion, and that credit check on its own is then captured so that when we access it, we can see where this particular person has applied for credit. And then on social media, we run a test through the platforms of Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, news articles, as well as your normal Google searches and other search engines. We're particularly interested in photographs of cars, houses, vacations, events attended by the particular subject under investigation. It is a well-known fact that many of a person's lifestyle is often displayed on social media, and it's a valuable tool in order to do this exercise. On the financial analysis, we obtained the information pertaining to bank accounts as well as the supporting documentation. And from this information, we also looked then at the salary information of the individual, the content of the bank accounts. We look at investments, trusts, endowment policies, or any other form of income. And then obviously we will match that against the questionnaire information and the bank statements to see whether these then fit a pattern. Now, what do we do? First of all, on the bank statements, we analyze the bank statements by categorizing it in order of deposits, withdrawals, and transfers. And then we further categorize it into amounts, dates, descriptions, and other account numbers. The reason being that the dates play a very important role the moment that you put everything back on a timeline in terms of your initial BIS information, your, let's say, your social media information, and then the information in the bank on the bank statements. If you put that all in a timeline, you ideally want that to measure up and give you some sort of a chronology of events. Obviously, salary plays a role, and you look at gross and net income, the deductions, as well as possible bonuses. Also, we will then detect other income, unknown deposits, for which we will then interrogate those deposits by asking further clarifying questions or during interviews. We also looked at the investment policies, and we determined whether some of these investment policies, whether they matured, whether there were any drawings made from that, as well as trust information. As I've indicated, and you can see in the left top corner, all of this is in compliance with the provisions of the protection of personal information. We strictly follow the routes as envisaged in Section 6 and Section 12 and 18 of the Act, which provides that the subject must provide consent unless you're busy with a investigation, which we were not, for a criminal investigation. So we followed the process of consent, which the Act clearly provides for. So, Chair, after we've done all of this, we then had a look at the whole picture on a one-on-one basis for each and every member that we reviewed, as well as the spouses. And our conclusion was that all the MECs and their spouses or life partners appeared to be living within their means. There were not any circumstances where we had any doubt about, let's say, income or expenditure that we could pick up, which raises a suspicion. Hence, we conclude that we could not find suspicious transactions on the bank accounts of the individuals for which there were no satisfactory clarification. Yes, there were income in the bank accounts, and we have followed it up with the individuals. They've provided us with the supporting documentation for the deposits or the income on the transaction or the bank statements, and we verified it, and we were satisfied that it is issues that's been clarified. Our conclusion then is that none of the MECs or spouses pose any, their income poses any conflict in their capacities as MECs. With regards to the business interests held by the MECs or their spouses for the period June 2017 till 31 May 2019, we were equally satisfied that none of these entities poses any conflict or interference in their capacity as MEC. I've already indicated that the financial interest held also does not conflict or seems to conflict with their capacity as an MEC. Our recommendations were, as Premier respectfully indicated, that we recommended that all interest be declared in businesses, even if those businesses are deregistered or dormant, especially if it's deregistered based on a failure to submit the annual returns. Now, this is something that we often find in our investigations, is that a company ceases to do business and for quite a while just don't do business, and actually the members have decided not to carry on with business, but for perhaps the company secretary or anyone else never deregister the company as such, and then the company is on the CIPC as dormant, although there's no business being conducted. We had an instance or two where this was the case, and hence the recommendation that all interested, whether deregistered or dormant, be declared. So, Chair, that is basically the findings of the investigation, and I'm quite satisfied that the way that the investigation was conducted was thorough, and that all the information that we have received, although it was a very difficult time, in mid of COVID, some of the members experienced constraints in getting some of the documentation because of COVID, but we didn't make any exceptions, and we finally got all the documentation we were looking for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And for the presentation. Before I hand over to my colleagues, I just want to get clarity on one item. The bank statements that you've, or the bank accounts, are those accounts that you've tracked yourself, or those accounts you've checked that people submitted to you?
Mr. Chair, those accounts are the accounts that were submitted to us. We cannot track the accounts other than by means of a Section 205 warrant in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, which we obviously were not investigating a criminal matter. So we relied on the members to provide it with that, but the cross checks that we've done with the accounts that we've got, we would have seen any transfers from in or out from these current accounts which were provided. That is also one of the limitations of the investigation, was that we did the investigation based on some of the information provided to us, as well as those other information that we were able to obtain.
Thank you very much, Advocate Labuschagne. I'm handing over to the committee members by show of hands. Member Dugmore, you can go. And Honorable Philander after that, and then Member Allen after that, in that order.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation to Nexus. Chair, if I could just start with one or two questions. I'm sure you'll allow us a second round, but I just want to raise the fact that in the presentation, it was indicated that this lifestyle audit covered the period of the 1st of June 2017 to the 31st of May 2019. And then you know, there was a press statement by the Premier, which was released on the 23rd of May, 2019. In other words, 7 days before the end of this lifestyle audit, where the Premier is quoted as saying basically that that he announced lifestyle audits for MECs, which they will undergo at the start and at the end of their terms. Now, it would appear from the presentation we've received that what the Nexus company looked at was, in fact, the previous cabinet, 1st of June 2017 to the 31st of May. So that is effectively, so what I would like to ask the Premier is the following. Was this in fact an audit of the previous cabinet? And when was the first time that you as the Premier, because, you know, from what I've looked at, the first time you announced this was in May of 2019. But the audit itself, and in that statement, you indicate that it will be done at the beginning of the term. So there are definitely some new MECs that have been appointed in the cabinet that that you head. So I just want to ask, when did the cabinet itself take this decision on lifestyle audits? And that's the one. And secondly, can we actually have a list of the names of those MECs that were in fact audited? What is the process in regard to the current cabinet, and that in regard to the procurement of the services of Nexus, what could we be provided with a copy of the performance agreement or the agreement between the Provincial Cabinet and Nexus for the period that this audit was intended to cover? And then could you also indicate what was the cost of the service provided by Nexus? I think the Premier is aware of the fact that we had raised as opposition a preference for a public institution such as the Public Service Commission or possibly the Auditor General to apply this. We fully support the initiative around lifestyle audits, and in saying that we prefer the approach of asking the Auditor General or the Public Service Commission or even the Public Protector to do this, it's in no way a reflection on the company that was successfully appointed to do the job which they've just reported on. But those are some of the initial questions I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Philander.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, on slide 12 to Nexus, the conclusion made is that MECs and their partners live within their means. I would just kind of ask to elaborate and clarify on how that is determined and the criteria used to come to that conclusion. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Member Allen.
Chairperson, thank you so much. Firstly, I would want to again commend the Premier together with the entire cabinet for submitting themselves to this process, which shows again that we are committed to accountability in the government. But I have two questions. Let me just get my notes. In terms of the period, and to latch on to Member Dugmore's question, the period is indicated from June 1, 2017 up until the end of May 2019, when the cabinet was appointed. Does the Premier envisage that at the end of this term, that all cabinet MECs will also again be undergoing such a process in terms of the current term from the 1st of June up until the end of the term? That's the one question. And to Nexus if I can get an understanding, Chairperson, regarding, and I don't require names, but if there's a percentage, for example, in terms of the methodology, it was indicated that clarifying questions to members and their spouses can be asked where necessary, as well as interviews where necessary. Are we able to get some input or some feedback to say, for example, that X amount were called for interviews, for example, or X amount for clarifying questions, just to get a gist of that line. But I am deeply pleased by the conclusion in terms of the second last slide. And I wish to commend the Premier again for taking this step. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the Premier first and then to Nexus.
Thank you very much, Chair, and to the members for the questions. First of all, to the Honourable Dugmore, thank you for your questions. The first question you asked, when did the Cabinet take this decision? It's not a Cabinet decision, it's my decision. It was part of a manifesto, and it was something that I announced straight after the election to say that, I'd said that I would put lifestyle audits in place, and that was my decision. Obviously, I also consulted with the Cabinet, but it was, it wasn't saying, are we going to do it or aren't we? The Cabinet was told that we are doing lifestyle audits. That was my call. Then the 2-year period. Now, obviously, you have to have a baseline in which to work from. So, we couldn't do a lifestyle audit on the day of your election. We had to give a period in which the auditors could now go and have a look. And one has a look at your own. Is your lifestyle currently commensurate with your income? And is there anything untoward that you might that might look suspicious? And we have to give a period. So the decision was let's have a look at a 2-year period before you get elected. And it was all based on the current Cabinet, but going back for 2 years. So if you were a previous Cabinet member in the previous Cabinet, of course, you would have been a Cabinet member, but it wasn't. That wasn't the prerequisite or what was necessary. It was just every member of Cabinet. We had to go back and look at 2 years prior to being elected. So whether you were in Cabinet or not is irrelevant. And this then sets the base. This then sets the baseline. So obviously it's got its own independence of an investigation, and if anything came out of it, it would have to be dealt with. But it also sets the record and the baseline for further or future lifestyle audits. Then I can't answer the questions on the procurement, so I think DG will have to probably answer that, or someone from the Premier's department. The fourth question is about why an independent a tender going out and asking for an independent organization versus a state organization. I think, obviously that was my choice as well, but already the Auditor General has oversight over our departments and our offices. Already the Public Service Commission plays a role in our government. And already the Public Protector is busy with different investigations. I also think that immediately would create a conflict of interest. I think about myself. I won't speak on behalf of my other Cabinet colleagues, but myself. In my current position as Premier, I have got questions from a member asking the Public Protector to investigate me. I've got a conflict with some of the PSC and DPSA position. And of course, I'm known for a court action against the Auditor General in my previous position as the MEC of Agriculture. I think that would have been a conflict about me going to court with the Auditor General and then saying, I think you should also do a full review on me as whether I'm clean or corrupt. And so I think that's why it is advisable that it is put out to tender and it's an independent organization. I also am, at the end of the day, there was no determinant as to where or who this organization should be or this company. But I actually, at the end of the day, I'm also quite grateful that the company is not even from the Western Cape, in actual fact based in Gauteng, because I think that also gives it its own independence and also removes any other kind of conflict. And then the last question that I need to deal with is the Honourable Allen's question. And yes, correct, as I said, the period of review is a 2-year period to give you a baseline, to have a look at the individual and come up with a finding, but also that baseline. And this lifestyle audit will be done again at the end of the term of office, or if any MEC leaves office between the start of their term and the end of the term, then we will do a lifestyle audit on that individual again, just to make sure that there's nothing untoward happened while you were actually in office as an executive member of this provincial council. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Premier. DG, do you want to answer the second levels of questions regarding the procurement?
Thank you, Chair. I can definitely do that. We have advertised a bit, obviously, as part of the normal supply chain processes. So it's been open, for anybody to actually have kind of tendered for this job. We then appointed Nexus Forensic Audit Services, and I think Member Dartmoor have actually asked for a copy of the service level agreement. We can do that, and in addition to that, I will also supply to the committee a copy of the bid documentation. So there's full disclosure on this entire issue, and then together with that, Chair, I will also provide the committee with the exact cost of this particular project. So I will supply it to the committee in writing as requested by Member Dartmoor.
Thank you. Thanks. We'll get the documentation from you. We'll send you a written request for it. Thank you very much. Nexus, was there any questions outstanding from your side? Edward Labuschagne.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I'm correct, there are 2 questions. The one first, with regards to how do we determine whether a person's living within their means. The response there too is the following. Once you have a clear picture of the income and the sources of assets and the revenue generated by this individual, then one can have a look at the expenditure and the lifestyle, the assets, as to what this person owned. Then what we do is, for instance, let's take a vehicle. You look at a 2019 model vehicle, we determine the value of the vehicle. We can see from the documentation that the vehicle is currently leased with a bank or a financing institution, and we determine then what is the repayment thereof, similarly with bond repayments, and then we measure that against the income as displayed in the bank accounts of the individual. And then once we are able to note that there's a severe discrepancy between the value of the properties or the movable assets vis-a-vis the income displayed in the bank statements, then that raises a question, and that then needs to be clarified. Obviously, we have done all of this and came to the conclusions that none of the MECs and or spouses owns property and or assets which they cannot afford. So we were quite satisfied with that. With regard to the second question, clarifying questions were asked to about 90% of the subjects or the persons. It was in the form of email correspondence or telephone calls. And then we had a formal interview with one of the MECs, quite a lengthy interview. And yeah, so basically everyone was subjected to either questions and or an interview. And all those questions were then followed up per email and is on record. Chair, I believe I've answered the two questions.
Yes, I just got a follow-up question from my side. On your Windy search, that's obviously for property in the country, not only in the Western Cape.
Yes.
And then secondly, does that include trust as well? Property owned via any trust, or property owned in the name of children as well, or family members, the spouse in this particular case? And then lastly, on the issue of your last recommendation, I just want to get your exact wording right here so I don't misquote you. Your wording is the MEC should be reminded of the importance to declare all interest in business entities. Based on your presentation and what you can share with the committee, has any of those business entities, deregistered or dormant, done business with the Western Cape government?
Chair, first of all, let me answer you on the question on the trusts. Obviously, if the MEC and or spouse has been a trustee of the trust and or a beneficiary of the trust, we would have picked it up, and we have checked that. So there was nothing to be concerned about. Secondly, with regards to the entities, the dormant entities, none of them had done any business with any organ of state.
Thank you. I see Member Dugmore's hand up, and Member Peter Murray after that. And in fact, Member Dugmore, if you don't mind, Member Murray did not ask questions yet. Can I give Member Murray a first opportunity? Member Murray?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Honorable Member Murray, you can continue.
Right. I just want to know, if there's one thing about a lot of politicians, and not everyone, but they are very adept at how to hide income and how to hide it away from the eyes of auditors. A member of parliament, if I'm a minister, I can delay payment to me for favors done till after I've relinquished my position and gone into retirement, or I might not again be appointed as a MEC after 5 years. If any money comes available to me after my term is expired, could you investigate that? Or don't you have the authority? Does your authority stop for the period that the MEC is in a position of MEC? Or how long after he ceased to be MEC can he still be investigated for money which he can't account for?
I think in this case, Member Murray, that was only done for the period 2017 to 31st of May 2019, but we appreciate your experience. We need to start looking at members that retired many years ago and see what they've got 5 years later. Member Dugmore?
Thank you. Thank you very much again, Chair. Chair, could I just ask, I know, and we thank the DG for agreeing to provide a copy of the service level agreement and the actual costs and so on. But could I just ask that in regard to this particular appointment, will the same company, Nexus, also do the audit that the Premier referred to at the end of the term of office of these MECs, or was the first procurement of this service simply to do the one that's been completed now, the one from the 1st of June 2017 to the 31st of May, or does the contract also include doing the second one? That's just a question. Okay, that's number one. And then I presume from the presentation that was given that the Nexus was mandated to look at the spouse and obviously the MEC or the life, I think the spouse or life partner. So there was, and possibly the Premier can respond to this. Was there a specific decision about why not also to look at family members? That's often an issue. I know in the public service, the Minister for the Public Service nationally has been raising the issue of family members of public servants and so on. Was it, and I know this was a lifestyle audit of the MEC, and I think the inclusion of the spouse was a good idea, but was there any thinking about possibly looking at family members? And then I would just like to ask, so this is the first report that we as members have seen. There's been a public statement issued, where it was emphasized that all of the MECs had passed the lifestyle audit with flying colors, etc. And now we've seen the presentation. Can I just ask Nexus, the representative from Nexus, Mr. Lafuskachny, was there another report besides this PowerPoint presentation? Was there another report, a more detailed report? I don't think we as members here are asking for details of people's bank accounts, but for instance, if you could just go to, I think, one of the slides which also talks about business entities, and I think the chair's raised, issues of dormant ones and that. But if one looks at the moment, this is what the public is going to see. This is what we as members are going to see. And essentially, if you can go to the second last slide with the findings, we see there that they're living within their means, no suspicious transaction. So in other words, that is the conclusion. So I'd like to know, firstly, was there a more detailed report presented to the Premier? And then ask the Premier, is it possible that, is this the only information that's going to be provided to the public? Or for instance, I mean, I suppose if any member of the public or any of us, go to Windeed, or we go to, issues related to ownership of companies, you can find that information. But would it be such a big issue to actually include more information? Did the service level agreement, what did the service level agreement ask for in terms of reporting? Was it just a PowerPoint presentation? Was it a detailed presentation actually going through details of different MECs? And is there any further disclosure that is going to happen of this particular audit that was done? And then finally to Nexus, also just saying thanks very much for the presentation and the work that was done. I would just like to ask, because I had a look at the Nexus website, in terms of Nexus itself, is Nexus doing any other work for any provincial government department, or has Nexus done any work previously for a provincial government department or a municipality based in the Western Cape? That's what I would like to ask. Thanks.
Thank you, members. Is there any other members' question so we can conclude on Nexus, please? Going once. Okay, no further questions. You can conclude, Premier, then Nexus.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much again to the honourable members for the questions. I think, Chair, you kind of answered Honourable Marais' question, but I want to also say that, obviously, we've taken a first stab at the lifestyle audits. And at the end of the day, you want to have an audit process that can be trusted. I mean, as the Honourable Dugmore says, that when you say it, that the public know, okay, we're actually feeling a lot more comfortable. Why do we do audits? Why on earth are we doing lifestyle audits? Well, quite frankly, I think in our country, we know that there is, way too much corruption, and it's about how do we create trust, and how do we find a clean environment that will develop that trust, but also when there is something untoward, that it can get dealt with immediately. So obviously, now I'm sort of my own personal stuff. When I got the reply, I thought, sure, that's quite good that I don't have to really get into dealing with one of my cabinet members because issues had to come out and charges have to be laid or whatever. But I mean, that's why we do it. We do it so that we can. I think first of all that politicians know that when they swear allegiance to the Constitution and that they're going to take this job, that they must understand that they've got to do it in the interests of the public and their customers, and it is not about enriching yourself. But if, as the Honourable Marais said, what about, and so we need to ask ourselves those questions, and how much further do we go? And it kind of links into the question that the Honourable Dugmore asked about why did we decide on the member and then the member's spouse and partner. And of course, where do you draw the line, and how long should a piece of string be? And yeah, I mean, maybe to improve it, maybe we need to go a bit wider, but we had to sort of set a standard. We had to start somewhere. And it becomes much more difficult the further out you go. And of course, I do hear what's being said, that maybe we do need to go a couple of layers out. But if you saw in the presentation, the kind of detail that we had to provide, I myself was subject to this, the physical copies of every single one of your bank accounts, your bank statements going back 2 years, every single document. It's quite a lot of work, number one. And number two, you also have to then, agree that, of course, Nexus is able to go and dig around and go and check it out. So, and of course, the wider you go, the greater the cost. But it's something that we need to analyze again. And what I would like to say to the members, it is something that I think probably the forensics team, DG, myself, and even speaking to some of the cabinet members as to how much wider do we go? What else can we do to make sure that it even gets better and we improve on it? So I hear what's being said, and I will take that back, and we'll think about it and consider, what could we do to make this even better? And maybe the next part of the question is, say, to Nexus as well. What would you have liked to have seen to enable you to do an even better job? Because in answering your question, Honourable Dugmore, the contract is for this investigation or this lifestyle audit. The detailed documents, I don't get to see the full detailed document, but those documents are provided, and DG can talk about it. They are locked away now in our safe, because those exact same documents and all that work that has now been paid for, that Nexus has done through taxpayers' money, must be made available to the next company, if Nexus gets it again, or whoever gets it again, when we procure, either at the end of the term, or if someone leaves, we'd have to procure services to get that done. You obviously have to make that bulk of documentation available. It also acts as the baseline document if something comes out and somebody, a whistleblower or somebody says, but hang on a second, as Honourable Marais said, now suddenly, after the audit is done, suddenly a company is registered, and we pick it up. We must be able to use both the Nexus report, but also, remember, this is also about integrity. So it also links through to your declarations. What did those members, what do we declare to the legislature? And is there an alignment? And I mean, those kind of questions are asked as well. So that because that also brings in, if there's an integrity gap there, then suddenly that you need to go and drill a bit deeper. What else did I think I've answered the thing on the next company. And then maybe also just to say that the deeper report, or the consequences of the actual report, I think it was noted in the report that some members have got dormant business accounts, and whether those businesses had done work with the government. I actually did ask the DG to go and have a look, and on the one, and go back 10 years, and there was no work done with this government in that 10-year period. And then I have also engaged with the ministers to say that even if you've got a dormant account, a dormant business, I don't even want a dormant business, when this happens again. If you're not doing trading and you're not declaring a business, well, that business must actually be closed altogether. It shouldn't be there. And that's my stance that I've had. Of course, there's no law precluding an MEC of having a business, dormant or not. But I think in the interests of what we're trying to achieve here, both as a government here, but also I think what we're trying to do in South Africa, I think it's a good principle to start with. What else? And maybe also just to say that even one of the dormant accounts or dormant businesses, in actual fact, that MEC had resigned from that business years ago. But sometimes the records are not correlated correctly, and there's a process now to make sure that that gets corrected. I know even my own, it wasn't now, it was a few years ago that SARS still had me registered in a couple of businesses that I'd sold 20 years ago, and still those records weren't up to date. But at least they're all up to date now, because none of them were picked up. It's all been cleaned up from my businesses before getting into politics. But sometimes, that's what these studies do, is they raise questions, and then you've got to be able to answer those questions, because those questions also would lead to the next round of investigations, etc. I think I have answered most of those questions. Just let me know if I haven't. And I'm not sure if the DG wants to add anything to that. Otherwise, back over to Nexus. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I proceed?
Yes, Mr. Marilla, you can.
Chair, I want to just connect to what the Premier is saying, just to make it quite clear. I mean, the Premier was also the subject of this lifestyle audit. And because of that, I mean, I then ran with all the administrative processes as the Secretary of Cabinet. And I mean, those responsibilities are clearly set out in legislation. So actually, it's basically from putting together the terms of reference, going through all the stuff, and also receiving all the reports, because the Premier was a subject of that. And therefore, the Premier did not receive any of these reports, didn't have insight into any of the stuff, because he is also subject to that. Where there were any issues that were identified, and I mean, if you look at, I think the last slide that was presented by Nexus in relation to reminding MECs of the importance to declare all interests, business interests, and particularly in companies that's either been deregistered or dormant, I effectively, as a Secretary of Cabinet, issued those letters to the respective MECs. And my office was also the conduit and the connection between Nexus, which is an independent company that did the forensic audit, and also the respective MEC. So I, as an example, also followed up on how far are there any issues? And then I, as the Director General, in my capacity as DG, then did the necessary follow-ups with regards to all the outstanding matters, etc. And as I've said early on, if there was any communication or anything that came out of this process, I then had to communicate to all the members. And I think the Premier responded to the issue around the next process. So, Chair, those reports, given the fact that it contains people's personal information, obviously those reports have been put under lock and key, because obviously we do not want people's personal stuff to actually be all out in the public, all over in the public. So that's the role that I played as a DG Chair, and therefore even the summarized report is a summary of what was found. And I mean, between myself and my forensic team, we've also made sure that there was compliance from Nexus side in relation to the terms of reference. And the terms of reference as set out was basically explained under the scope and mandate, as well as the methodology that was presented by Nexus early on, Chair. I think that takes care of the issues, Chair. And I mean, I've committed to provide both the TOR as well as the SLA to Parliament, as well as the cost that we've paid in relation to this. Thanks.
Thank you, DG. I'll hand over to Nexus.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm going to respond to two questions. The first one was whether we have presented a report other than the PowerPoint presentation, and I think the DG has already alluded to a full comprehensive report that's been provided, and I have to confirm and stress the fact that the content of that report falls under the provisions of the POPI Act and that the privacy clauses in terms of the Constitution is applicable, Section 14. That was highlighted during the investigation and when we obtained the consent forms, is that the consent is on the premise that the provisions of the Act as well as the privacy provision in terms of Section 14 of the Constitution will be adhered to. I can confirm further that this report of Nexus was not disseminated to any other person except to the DG. The Premier has not received any report from Nexus. We have presented our reports and our findings to the DG, and it is up to the DG then to distribute the report to any of the interested persons relevant. The second question relates to the services of Nexus to the provincial government of the Western Cape or other provincial governments and or municipalities. Chair, Nexus is a company that provides its services across the whole of South Africa to several organs of state, national departments, provincial departments, municipalities, in all the provinces. We have been investigating municipalities from the Western Cape, Northern Cape, KZN. I think there's not even a province that we haven't had an investigation before. So yes, we have done work for the provincial government or provincial governments as well as to municipalities in the Western Cape. But as I say, our services ranges across the whole of South Africa. So I can't take the point any further.
Thank you very much for that. Members, I did conclude the questions, but I see Member Murray's hands up. I'm going to give him the last opportunity, Member Murray.
Thank you so much, Chairman, for your generosity. I just wanted to know, I'm a bit perturbed that the Premier, he's the head of the cabinet, but he has no insight into these reports, but the DG well. So I want a bit of an explanation here why the DG is privy to these reports, but not the Premier himself, the one who can fire both the DG and the ministers. He can't see it. So I wanted to ask, first of all, why? And then I would like to ask the Premier, does he not think, this is great what is done, to have this done, this audit reports on MECs, but shouldn't this be now brought to the attention of those higher up? It's about time the Western Cape hang out our colours to be proud of. And can the President have insight, not the report itself, but just from the Premier to say, we've had this audit done by an independent company, Nexus, and the report is as follow conclusions, like we saw it here, and make this public. The people always mistrust politicians. If there's a few rotten apples, they think we all are rotten. So I would like to ask the Premier, don't you think you should also now hang our colours up there as the Western Cape and make this known by to the media and to the President and then the media?
Thank you, Honourable Member Murray. If I can take the opportunity to ask the final question from the Premier. Premier, given that the Cabinet has received a fair and just opportunity to make their declarations known in this process, can you assure this committee that should anything comes to light that has not been declared to Nexus or to during this process, that you will, what's the consequences of those actions going to be? Because people had a fair and just opportunity to declare interest, whichever interest they have. Can you assure this committee there will be serious consequences? I think that is the thing people want in this country, consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll start with that. And obviously, I think that is exactly why we do this, and that if there is untoward, there actually must be consequences. Otherwise, it's pointless running the exercise in the first place. I think the next point, whether we send all the detail or even just my own detail to the president or not, I mean, we must think about that. Obviously, we are our own constitutional, government. But when it comes to the question about why to the DG and not to me, remember that I believe is part of a good governance process. Imagine if Nexus reported to me, but now I was already crooked dealing with some of my MECs and covering with them. That would not be the right process to follow. And of course, so that's why I think from a good governance point of view, it goes to the DG. And in actual fact, Nexus's connection through the DG to the various MECs in the process was also a key interlocutor. If it was me going to the MECs, I think that would have also been bad governance principles. But when the reports came back, if there was an issue, for example, on a dormant company, which was raised by Nexus, then what the DG did is the DG would then report to me that MEC A has got a dormant company, there's nothing untoward. Then I'm the one that took the decision to say, hang on a second, and then I wrote to the MEC to say, in this government, I think it would be a good idea that we don't have any ministers with dormant companies. Please, would you make sure that you actually change this? Obviously, then as the Premier, I take that responsibility because, as Honourable Murray said, I'm the one that appoints the MECs, not the DG. But from a good governance point of view, and you would have also noticed that forensics is here as well. They've also got to help us as a government to make sure that wherever there's any question that we're able to investigate and we're able to then come back to the Chair's point is be decisive if there's anything untoward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Premier. And also want to, any closing remark from Nexus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it is just prudent from our side to say we thank the provincial government for the opportunity to provide the services. We believe that the report would be beneficial for the government going forward, and we're looking forward to be of services again.
Thank you, Advocate Labaskagni. From my side, let me just thank the Premier, the HOD, and Nexus for coming to share this report with us and entertaining the questions from the members of this Parliament. Accountability is a hallmark of the Western Cape, and we do believe in holding everyone accountable in this Parliament. And we appreciate that this was done. This is the first step, as the Premier said, to ensure that we restore faith in the public, not only in Parliament, but in the executive. And that is our responsibility to show the public that what we're doing is right. Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching, they say. So those dormant companies, I presume they're probably closed or they've been fixed because we are in government and we need to govern. I think that's the important part. So thank you, Premier, HOD and your team and everybody involved in presenting this to us today. We will meet on this topic again in a few years' time or whenever Nexus is appointed and have a look and see if anything has changed on the lifestyle. So if I see the Premier driving a Ferrari soon, I know he did not declare it. So thank you very much, Premier. Any parting shots before you leave us?
Thank you very much, Chair. You'll just see me on a bicycle, not on a Ferrari. But can I also thank the members? And as I said, I'm serious about how do we improve. If anybody's got an idea on what we should be doing to improve this, I'm really interested in that. We really have to, fix corruption in our country. I welcome, the focus that we're seeing from the president, where we're seeing, appointments of bodies that are coming together to do investigations. We have to do that. The brand. And as politicians, we all are subjected to the same or combed with the same brush, and we all sort of affected by the rotten apple, and so it's I think in all of our interests to make sure that we find tools and mechanisms that we can start to build that trust and get rid of this blight called corruption in our country, and we've all got to work very hard at it. So thank you very much to the committee members. That option or that offer is always open. And of course, can I thank Nexus for the work that you did, as well as the DG and the team. Thank you very much for the work that you did in making sure that we got this complete. Also during COVID-19, it was not the easiest thing to get done, but it's done, and it's a great start. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, we're going to take a 5-minute break just to stretch the legs and visit wherever you want to visit for 5 minutes, have a cup of coffee, and also swap presentations. We're going to deal with the Public Service Commission. Please do not log out, just put off your microphone, and we'll reconvene at 22 minutes past 1, 13:22, and then we'll excuse the Premier and his team, and the Public Service Commission will join us in 5 minutes. Thank you.
to provincial parliament. I am not going to. I finished the presentation beforehand, so I'm not going to go through all of the preliminary details who we are and so on. I think this committee is quite aware of our function and our role, and so I'm going to proceed to slide 6, which deals with the grievance management and cases finalized. If the committee wants to stop me, or chairperson, you want to stop me along the way, you can do so. But I'm just going to highlight a few things because I assume the committee has had an opportunity to read the presentation. So you will see, chairperson, that as far as grievances are concerned, most of the grievances that we've dealt with and finalized have been unsubstantiated, 81%, with only a small portion of 6.255%, which has been substantiated. And that's for the 6-month period in respect of all provincial departments. Moving on, the response tracks the response from the departments to the Public Service Commission grievance outcomes, and we'll see that apart from that, where no response is needed, generally in respect of this reporting period, there was agreement in respect of the outcome, because obviously departments have the opportunity to disagree with recommendations made and findings made in respect of grievances. We move on, chairperson, to the nature of the cases in respect of grievances. I pause to mention, Chair, that obviously our work entails grievances on the one hand, secondly complaints, and we'll see the other issues, which is the financial disclosure. So we're dealing with grievances at the moment. So the nature of the cases and observations, you'll see, Chair, that we sort of track in terms of what is the prevailing issues that come out in respect of grievances. So we do a sort of trends analysis as we go along in dealing with these cases. So a number of cases relating to filling of posts, grievances relating to filling of posts. One issue that we've identified is that very often public servants are asked to act in positions. When these positions are advertised, then they do not qualify in terms of their academic qualifications. And so, of course, one of the issues is that that some attention needs to be given to how, when people are asked to act, some thought needs to be given. I'll speak to a bit as to how we're going to deal with the trends and how we propose to deal with them. But that's one of the issues, the filling of posts. Then a lot of grievances relating to leave applications for study purposes. There seems to be an issue relating to people qualifying for study leave at sort of mid-year when they do not write off a subject at a tertiary institution. That's a policy issue. Again, I will speak to that in terms of how we propose to deal with that. And then, of course, temporary incapacity leave is a perennial issue for grievances where people exceed their sick leave and they need to go for extended periods of time. One of the challenges there, of course, is that these processes which could be described as inefficient between the relevant departments and the health risk manager. So you have an employee sitting at home while this process is playing itself out, only to be told later on that your temporary incapacity leave has not been approved, and then of course there's debt which needs to be paid in them having been paid for that period. Now, what we do in this trends analysis, when we do sign off on the grievances, we also then individually make recommendations to departments, not only in respect to the specific grievance and whether or not it's substantiated or not. We make recommendations as to what the departments can do in order to address this at a broader level. Because obviously we see more and more this coming through. One would want to prevent grievances in the sense that one wants to make sure that there's some learnings that come out of each and every grievance. So we do make those individual recommendations. What we also proposed to do was to have regular meetings then with departments, human resources components, as well as the labor unions. We were on the verge of having one of those when COVID-19 broke. And so we're going to have to now reorganize that and probably work in a virtual space. But that, I think, is very important and critical for departments and for ensuring labor peace, that departments learn from the trends. And so that will be something that we will be taking forward. Now, we also deal with, as the Public Service Commission, the National Anti-Corruption Hotline. Now, this is not a primary mandate of the Commission. However, by virtue of a Cabinet Memorandum of August 2003, this hotline was established, and we have been asked to take responsibility for managing this National Anti-Corruption Hotline, which we have been doing ever since. Of course, some of the objectives of this, I'll just mention again, is to deter corruption, to detect incidents of corruption, to ensure that there's successful investigation, and to enable callers to remain anonymous. So it has to do with creating a tool, among others, of fighting corruption in essence. So the reports, and there's a pie diagram there that shows, the extent to which people are anonymous or not, but we receive these through various methods: telephone calls, faxes, emails, and then, as I said, 65% of callers wish to remain anonymous, which on the one hand is a powerful tool, but on the other, it does present its own challenges. One can't always go back to get information. In one meeting I had with Provincial senior management, one of the challenges raised by a HOD was that people's reputations are tarnished sometimes, and you don't even know who it is. But those are some of the negatives that comes with trying to put an environment there to prevent corruption. So now you'll see there, in terms of the statistics provided, in the past 6 months, our office have finalized 18 investigations in respect of the National Anti-Corruption Hotline. Yeah. Now, we bear in mind here that this is not all investigations we have done. In essence, what we do is we refer these matters, the allegations, we refer to the departments, and the departments then do the investigations. But it does take considerable time from ourselves and our own investigators. And so I think that is quite an accomplishment to have finalized 18. The other reason why I say it's an accomplishment is because a lot of these cases were serious backlogs. There were backlogs that were sitting in the system, some as far back as 2016 that these cases have been reported. And I'd like the committee, in a sense, to understand how this backlog originates. Prior to my appointment in 2018, the Commission in the Western Cape had an arrangement and understanding with provincial government that when these reports come in via the National Anti-Corruption Hotline, they would be referred, the allegations would be referred to the Provincial Forensic Services. What then happened was PFS, Provincial Forensic Services, would decide what to investigate themselves, either dealt with financial misconduct or fraud or corruption, and the rest they would refer to the departments. The challenge which I identified when I took office, or a few months into taking office, was the fact that I thought that it's the MEC, the minister, and the accounting officer who is responsible for that department. And so my challenge was that I felt that we should then hold them responsible from the outset. And we then changed tack. And I met with the departments, I met with PFS, and we then changed tack and said every allegation that comes in will be brought to the attention of the minister and the DG as the accounting officer. And that is where I would go back and get feedback from. Because one finds a backing and forthing between Provincial Forensic Service and the department. I must say, though, that even having done that, we still have these challenges. Because, in essence, most of the departments don't have forensic capacity. So this matter might be referred to the HOD and the minister, but then gets referred on to Provincial Forensic Services. And there, it seems there might be some sort of capacity challenge. So there still is this toing and froing. And so there's been this real push from our side with departments to try to finalize. I can now say that there are only 3 matters which resides under National Anti-Corruption Hotline and other complaints which are older than 1 year. And it is our intention to finalize those 3 within the next 2 months. which means that all the investigations and which we are dealing with are things which are less than a year old. And that is the space we I'd like to be in, because when somebody reports corruption, when they report whatever they're reporting irregularities, the thinking is that this thing needs to be resolved as soon as possible. So what are the nature of these investigations? So there's allegations relating to 10 irregularities involving officials from the Department of Transport and Public Works. These are very, very technical investigations. And we are still working on some of the feedback we've received on, I think, 2 of these. Unethical behavior in respect of leave forms being submitted. So managers make their own arrangements outside of the public service prescripts in respect of leave. This seems to be a growing issue. Where reports are made and people are not on leave, and leave, of course, time equates to money. Service standards at health facilities, so people complain about these as well. Victimization and unhealthy interpersonal relationships. We're monitoring this trend because clearly this is an issue in the public service. You need to have healthy relationships in order to deliver services. And then recruitment and contract extension irregularities is another one. So we take a number of lessons from these investigations, which again, as with the grievances, when we make findings and recommendations, we communicate with the departments. We don't say this is substantiated or not, and we leave it at that. We make recommendations where we see challenges in the policy environment, where we see challenges in the interpersonal environment. We make recommendations, and sometimes if it's very serious, we would even ask for feedback from the department. We want to see how they followed up on that. So some of the lessons we've learned is that the school governing body environment is a challenging environment. And I get the sense, and I don't think that this is only in the Western Cape, that because of these challenges, the Provincial Education Department seems to take a hands-off approach. And honorable members, I need to stress here that just from 1 or 2 interactions and complaints and lodged, this area is fraught with opportunity for corruption, is fraught with opportunity for misuse of monies from the public, from poor members of the public with impunity. So this I flag as a very, very serious area. For example, just as an example, we're still busy with an investigation which a complaint was lodged in 2016 at a school, not a very wealthy school, which has access to transport routes from the Cape Flats and the townships, and so many young people from those areas, and obviously their parents struggle to pay the school fees. Complaints from 2016, where complaints were lodged with the department, provincial department, national minister, a range of agencies, and no progress was being made from the side of the department in terms of this. It's typically located within the environment of the school governing body and spending and how spending is happening, what's happening with assets at the school, what's happening in respect of funds. In this matter, we, for example, uncovered recently because we refused to let go of this, a whistleblower and somebody who confessed. In one session, confessed to spending, I think, about 80,000 Rand. In this one particular issue, I'm taking it so seriously that I'm saying that if the principal and the governing body chair doesn't report this matter to the Hawks, then my officials will report the chairperson of the governing body and the principal, because in terms of legislation, they're obliged to report. So this is one school. And because of the, I don't want to, in a sense, unregulated nature of the environment, it's fraught with difficulties. It's really an area that one needs to give attention to. Then other lessons is that when officials are contracted, the law must be strictly applied. This we see time and time again with appointments. Leave management. It's important that we deal with the prescripts and ensure that supervisors don't act outside of the policy framework and outside of the powers that they've been provided with. Now, what needs improvement in departments? We have an excellent relationship with departments, with HODs, MECs. Really, the challenge does come in when there are recommendations which is unpopular. And I get the sense that departments see the PSC as a hindrance, that, you know, we are doing what we can in the Western Cape. We are in a good governance environment here, and so we know what to do. So I really get the sense when we start scratching and asking questions. I get the impression that sometimes, you know, investigations are not vigorously pursued. And that translates to a matter of 2016 not having been finalized in by 2019, 2020. Remember, we relied on the departments to do what they need to do in order to give us feedback so that we can finalize it on the National Anti-Corruption Hotline database. Then the cases that are referred on are not always coordinated or managed effectively in departments. You will have investigations that exist at different levels, at different points in the department. So the school example that I said, there's an investigation at one level in the department. Then there's the investigation we're dealing with. Now suddenly you're dealing with an investigation in respect of an official. You find that this person has been disciplined on one aspect of the wrongdoing when other aspects are still being investigated. So we get this impression that there's not a coordinated manner of dealing with these things. The use of the provincial forensic services, again. As I indicated, I hold departments accountable. And the forensic service ought to have the capacity, but sometimes, often, it seems that there's a delay with investigations because departments refer on to the forensic services. So this needs to be ironed out. If there's a challenge in respect of capacity at forensic services, that then needs to be addressed. What we are proposing now to departments, and we do when we interact with them, is that when we refer matters, that investigators are formally assigned by the head of department. Letters must be issued stating what the terms of reference are, timeframes, and the supervisor must be informed. That is a formalized process within the department. And that a senior manager needs to be assigned to coordinate, but also to, in a sense, have free rein to get information within the department, just to speed up the process. That is in respect of the NAG and complaints framework. During the period under review, my office undertook a research study where we assessed the response of the WCD to emergency repairs at schools. Now you'll see there's some of the headlines that was doing the rounds. 2019, they speak about nationally, 70 schools are death traps. We know there was an incident in Gauteng last year. Immediately after that incident, there was something in the Western Cape. Prior to that, in October, there was a Mitchells Plain school falling apart, where I did a site visit. And in speaking to the principals, it became clear that, you know, these are not isolated incidents and that we need to be proactive in not dealing with matters on a case-by-case basis. And so I initiated the study with terms of reference, with buy-in from the department, Western Cape Education Department, and the Department of Transport and Public Works. And in essence, those were our objectives: to assess the effectiveness of the system, dealing with repairs, to gain insight in the end user experience, the end user being, of course, the school and the principal, and to assess the effectiveness of the response by the department as perceived by principals. Now, we received feedback, and we then made a number of findings and there's recommendations. We do acknowledge that in respect to the findings, we did receive a lengthy response in respect of issues relating to the methodology and so on. However, we are confident that the survey was dealt with objectively and fairly. We involved, as you see there, 82 principals of high schools and primary schools in the different educational districts. And some of the key findings is that not all principals are familiar with the standard operating procedures for emergency repairs at schools. and most of them need to be reacquainted. Also, that there needs to be objective criteria to define what constitutes a pressing emergency. Because for one person, an emergency, for one school, an emergency would, for example, be the fact that a fence is broken. This might not be an emergency, that a fence is broken in one area. In another area, if you're in a gang-ridden area, for example, that might be an emergency. And so we're saying establish objective criteria so that we separate the routine maintenance issues from the emergency repair requests. Also, most of the principles indicated that some of the repairs were as a result of maintenance not being done in the first place. And so that leads to buildings being hazardous. And that was my challenge in the first instance when I went into those two schools and parents were complaining that, you know, you got walkways that's collapsed or balconies that's collapsing. My question then is, why is that now an emergency? Has there not been ongoing maintenance? And I was confirmed in that instance, more than half the principals acknowledge that it's because of the lack of maintenance that some of these things now become an emergency, which means, of course, that everything else stands still, you deal with that emergency, you make safe the environment. So also there's an issue that that a large number of emergency repair requests were not responded to within the time frame that was set out in the SOP and was initiated long after the period when they should have been. And then, of course, that excludes us making safe, because obviously if there's an emergency, the department takes the approach, you go and make safe the building. It doesn't repair, but you make safe to make sure that you safeguard life and property. But there is acknowledgement that there is, it's not within the time frames that a lot of these repairs take place. And then, of course, there's just the graph there setting out the approximate number of days it took the WCD to make first contact with the school. This is in respect of the responses from those principals. So you'll see there the number of days that some principals say, up to 20, 25 days after a report has been made. So there's a number of recommendations that has gone to the department. The department's taken a number of these on board. Others they have not. And so we're saying the definitions must be dealt with. It must be tidied up. It must be more detailed. The time frame should be adhered to, but it must be monitored in respect of performance, very, very importantly. And then a specific intentional role must be given to the principal during delivery of the infrastructure. And you must allow him to do some oversight, because very often what happens, the principal just doesn't know. He lodges a call or a call to say there's repairs needed or there's emergency repairs on the system. Then contractors come out, or public works or WCD comes out. The next thing is got contractors on site. He doesn't know what they are coming to do. Then they say, no, but we've made safe. So we're saying there needs to be a role for the person on site who is the principal. And so here again, that principals must be informed of the repair specifications. And then also that finally that the WCD must have a system that guarantees first contact with principals once an emergency repair has been logged. Because remember, emergency repairs are things which can be dangerous for the safety of learners and other staff. Yeah, so that's the study in respect of the emergency repairs. Now, one other area of work that the Public Service Commission does, and this was at one stage until recently coordinated by our national office, but has now been sent on to the provinces, is the monitoring of 30-day payments. And this is the current state of affairs in respect of 30-day payments. Remember, this 30-day payment is something which is being monitored nationally to make sure that suppliers are paid within 30 days, because we're dealing with businesses, small businesses, and so on. And now we've monitored this last 2 years, and we see that in this department, you can see the movements. In many instances, there's either an increase in respect of the value involved and a decrease in the rand value, or vice versa. But basically, the situation seems to be deteriorating. Now, we've had feedback from one department, which is health, and they, for example, said to us, look, this is probably as the result of COVID. You know, COVID hit. we were the lead department. We needed to make sure that we dealt with things. Not only that, but you can see that as you go July, as the economy opens up, we are getting things together because we needed to adjust to a new way of working, which is remotely. We brought this to the attention of the departments because we are saying that while we're in a better position than many national departments and many provinces, it is something that we need to monitor on an ongoing basis. And COVID is something that hit. We need to acknowledge that. However, as government, as public service, one needs to be prepared for things of this nature. So this needs to be a wake-up call in a sense for departments to say, listen, this is a red area. We need to start seeing why is this the case and interrogating that. We have just had contact with departments, and I think they are still interrogating the data and seeing where the challenges lie at this stage. An annual issue that we deal with is the question of the financial disclosure framework. And so all members of senior management service are required to disclose the particulars of the registrable interest, much as one would have seen in the presentation by Nexus in respect of the provincial executive, companies and properties. So they've got to declare that by not later than the 30th of April. And the EAs are to submit copies to the PSC by the 31st of May. And we then look through that data. And same issues that was picked up by Nexus, I suppose we pick up annually, the issues relating to companies that's in the process of being deregistered, cars that's registered in their name, in name of SMS employees, but are then but are used by the children and so on. So we don't go there and say there's an issue there. We go and engage with these SMS members, and then we do a report to the Premier and to all the different MECs in respect of that. We have 100% compliance this year. So everybody has submitted. And there has not been identified any conflict of interest, because we look at the possible conflicts, so there's no conflict of interest either. So we are in a good space as a Western Cape province. Then we deal with financial misconduct as well. And departments are compelled to report on finalized financial misconduct cases and report it to us. And so in that pie chart, one is able to see, which departments have the most financial misconduct. Of course, the big one is education. Yeah, the big one is education. It's one of the bigger departments. Education and health are the bigger departments, and so it makes sense that they would be there. Carrying on, we look at the levels of employees charged with financial misconduct. Very, very interesting. And so one would see lower level employees, level 5, very high, quite high. And that is, of course, your senior admin level. Then level 7, admin officers, and level 7. And then admin officer, senior admin officer, and level 10, assistant director, and then deputy director, level 12. Interestingly, and this might be something for departments to reflect on, one then sees a drop. Okay, one sees a drop from that level, and so that there is very little people charged with financial misconduct at your senior management service level, which might be a good thing. On the other hand, these are the people who are in charge. These are the people who one holds accountable: your directors, your chief directors, your DDGs, and your HODs. So maybe that is something for departments to reflect on. Then also on the next slide, we're looking at the amounts recovered. Of course, it should be the objective to try to recover everything that has been lost. Finally, Chairperson, I say this every time, and that as a PSC we are resourced to the institution. We've met with the speaker and the deputy speaker, and we're very mindful of obligation to report to the legislature, and we've been sending reports to the legislature by the speaker, which we deemed appropriate. One of the reports, which I'm not going to speak to unless members really want to, is the report relating to a finding relating to the HOD of education. Another committee dealt with that, or is dealing with it on education. But Chairperson, I must say, as the committee to which the PSC accounts, in conclusion, I would be remiss if I do not express concern here in respect of the legislature, not this committee, but there was the chairperson and some members of the committee will know about the report that went to the speaker. The Education Standing Committee entertained a report drafted by the PSC without inviting the PSC to that meeting to speak to the report. As a result, the committee read the report and there were challenges there, because while I was at pains to ensure that my officials sent the report to the legislature, including all annexures which reflects my interaction with the Premier, so that we do not have a one-sided approach, those annexures were not included when it was circulated to members. As a result, members made comments to the effect that that the report was one-sided, the report was biased, which was not the case, but it's an error that happened because officials at the legislature, had I been invited to the committee meeting to speak to the report, that would have been prevented. Secondly, the Premier and the DG was at that meeting. Contents of email streams were read, not in its entirety. When one had the entire context, one would have seen what the context was of those emails, and as a result, I watched that presentation and that meeting via live stream. I wasn't, as I said, I hadn't been invited. As a result, a skewed impression was created. And the challenge, Chairperson, is that while as a constitutional body we account to this legislature, if one deals with the report in that manner, it can have the unintended consequence of undermining the work of a constitutional body. So there's still work outstanding on that side. I don't know whether I will be called to the legislature or not, but there is challenges on that side. The result has been at this stage that they're waiting on I believe on a legal opinion from a legal advisor. But outside of this of the legislature, a teacher being disciplined has now raised this report in court papers. So I just think one needs to be very careful in terms of, as much as departments are given the opportunity to speak to reports, when a report is authored, I think it's important that the author of that report, especially a constitutional institution, and it's not this committee, but I raise it with this committee, be given the opportunity to speak to those reports, because it can have unintended consequences if that is not the case. Chairperson, that is all from my side, and I would welcome questions from the honourable members. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. I saw there was a hand up. I'm not sure if that was a point of order, or can I just get clarity, Member Dagmo, before I continue?
No, Chair, it's just a request to make to ask some questions and to make a short make a few comments. Yeah, it's not wasn't a point of order.
Of course, thank you. We're going to start before I respond to the PSC and obviously to the input, and to give members of this committee an opportunity just to. Member Dagmar, I recognize your hand. Is there any other member? Thank you, Member Murray, and then Member Philander, in that order for now. Thank you.
Chair, can I proceed?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just by way of information, first of all, I think yesterday the committee coordinator, Wasima, emailed us a copy of the Nexus report, which we discussed before this. Can I just check this report that has just been presented? Was it actually emailed to us today, or because I don't recall getting it yesterday? Can I just ask that question first?
So remember, Dagmar, which one are you talking about?
This one, the one that we discussed, the Public Service Commission.
Oh, it was emailed to the committee last week, I think.
Last week. Okay, my apologies for that. Okay. Look, I think right at the outset, in terms of the conclusion by the Commissioner, I want to make a very firm proposal that, in fact, this situation which happened in the education portfolio really needs to be corrected. I think it's absolutely inexplicable why the Commission was not invited to a meeting where a very public difference around the extension of the HOD's contract was being discussed. And what we're hearing further now was that certain documentation provided was then apparently not shared with members of that committee. So, Chair, I want to formally propose that you, as our chairperson, hopefully with the support of the other members, would request a joint meeting between this committee, because this is where the Public Service Commission accounts, and the Education Portfolio Committee has a joint meeting where we can discuss and ask all the questions we need to ask around this issue of the extension of the HOD contract. And I think this committee should register its concern at what has just been shared with us about the fact, one, that the information we were presented now, evidence we were given here, was that certain documents were not shared with members of this legislature, and secondly, that the Commissioner himself or his office was not invited. I find that a very serious issue. I think, Chair, you would remember that there was a multi-party process to receive nominations and make a recommendation as to a Western Cape representative for the Public Service Commissioner or Commissioner for the Western Cape. We've all agreed to the appointment. They are a constitutional institution, and I'm very, very concerned at the report that we've just received. So that's a formal proposal that I would like this committee to discuss. And then the second question that I would like to ask is, in fact, linked to the first presentation, and I note that the Public Service Commission was in that briefing as well, and we've just heard from the Commissioner that, in fact, they deal with disclosures and so on by senior public servants. I would just like to ask a question. I'm not aware, and I'm not aware that there's any mandate for the Public Service Commission to conduct lifestyle audits. But could I just ask, would the Public Service Commission in this province have the capability, obviously with the necessary support provided, to conduct a lifestyle audit as the Premier of this province has initiated? I explained in the earlier committee that our position as the opposition, as the ANC, is that it would be preferable that an institution like the Auditor General or the Public Service Commission actually conducts that, because now we just also heard evidence there that, in fact, this report, that the report that was compiled goes to the DG, and it in fact does not go to the Premier himself. And it's a whole issue of what would, and then if the Commissioner can just give us a view, what is your view at a governance level? You as the Commission, have oversight over the disclosure of our senior public servants. At a governance level, do you anticipate any possible conflict between the Public Service Commission conducting such an audit? I was concerned, Chair, to be honest, when the Premier raised, when I asked about both the Auditor General and the Public Service Commission, he indicated that there is potential conflict because when he took the Auditor General to court around the annual report of the Department of Agriculture when he was the MEC, and now he's involved in a dispute with the Public Service Commission about this extension of the head of departments. But from where I'm sitting, I don't see that as a conflict. That is the normal work that he's done, and it shouldn't compromise an issue of a lifestyle audit. I'm not making this a party political issue. I'm just asking in regard to lifestyle audits, even though it is not in the mandate, is this something that at a governance level, the Public Service Commission could do, and at a capacity level, could they just comment on that? And then I'll also, if there's time, just have a second bite at some of the more detail. I'm also concerned at some of the reports that have been raised about school governing bodies. And could we also just ask for, is there a separate or a more detailed report which highlights those particular concerns where I think the words in inverted commas are used are almost like left alone. I can't recall exactly what the term was, but left alone, and that in that context of not being monitored, there could be abuses regarding appointments made by school governing bodies. And also just wanted to check, was that reference to SGB posts in particular, or was that in general just appointments even of permanent WCD posts made by governing bodies? But I would like some more detail on that. Thank you.
Member Murray.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I must say, after having listened to the Nexus report and what I hear now, there seems to be conflicting evidence of what's going on in this province. First of all, we heard here that there serious complaints are being lodged, but no action taken by the Minister of Education here in the Western Cape. We also hear that spending by school governing bodies is not what it should be, and that it's unregulated how they spend the money. We also heard that there seems to be conflict emerging between two bodies, that's the Public Service Commission and Provincial Forensic Services. I think the two of them speak past each other. How are we going to resolve this if they have their own internal investigations by forensics, but the Public Service Commission are not let in on what's going on? And then we have the report saying there's lack of maintenance at our schools. I'm shocked because we've just been on the committee has just been on a Platteland expedition to look at schools. Maybe we didn't look deep enough. And I would like to know a list of these schools which the Public Service Commission has referred to, where maintenance is. We want a list of those schools so that we can go visit them and investigate them and see why it is. Now, the last point, what is the cooperation between the Western Cape Education Department and the Public Works Department? Do they ever speak to each other? Public Works is supposed to look after maintaining schools. Now, if the schools are in such a bad state, how come the Public Works Department has not been held to account by it? So, and did they budget for this? Do they have a medium-term expenditure framework budget to repair these schools or not? There's a disconnect between our departments, which I think the Premier should take full responsibility for, because he determines whether there's going to be any interaction between the various departments. He can even instruct them to meet regularly to iron out these problems. There's no reason why the Premier can't do it. He can force them to have regular meetings to iron out problems of this nature. And also that the author of the reports are not invited when these reports are tabled. I can't explain. How does that happen? I must say I'm sitting here listening to the Public Service Commission and I'm shocked. I think we need a thorough investigation. We must find out why our schools are in such a rotten state. Where did the money go to that should have paid for the repairs? And is Public Works not doing its job? Maybe the Premier should consider relieving the Minister of his job. We are not an administration chairperson. Before 1994, the Western Cape or the province was provincial administration, which means administrators ran this province. The whole country at provincial level was run by administrators. Now We don't have a provincial administration where for Western Cape, and I've got my library card here, Western Cape Provincial Parliament. So these administrators, they must report to us. We don't report to them. I want to ask the chairman that when this is over, we will ask for direct investigation by the relevant committees about the state of repair of our buildings, especially our schools, clinics and hospitals, whatever falls under the provincial government's authority, because I'm really shocked.
Thank you, Member Moray. Member Philander.
Chairperson, thank you very much. Chairperson, just perhaps for clarity, the gentleman presenting, in terms of the, if I can call it a complaint with regards to the Education Department presentation and not being invited. Chairs, myself was not at that engagement, and I am uncomfortable at this point to make such a recommendation as proposed by Member Dugmore, not having the full facts as to who was there, who was invited, who was supposed to be there, who was supposed to present, and so forth. Did I hear correctly when the gentleman said that this matter has been brought under the attention of the Office of the Speaker, Chairperson? If that is the case, I would want us to propose to perhaps for you in your capacity as the Chairperson to take that matter up further with the Office of the Speaker and then report back to this committee. But I feel in not being there and knowing the facts, Chairperson, it would not in the right means or ways to establish a whole new resolution not based on the facts as to what has transpired. That is my 2 cents regarding that matter, Chairperson. Chair, in terms of the grievance management cases as was presented, out of the 16 cases, 11 of those cases were in the health sector. What were the nature of these grievances, Chairperson? Also noting, of course, that only 8 of them were, or rather 8 of them were unsubstantiated. Only 1 of them were substantiated and 2 cases were withdrawn, Chairperson. I would like to know what was the action steps that were taken in that substantiated case. Chairperson, on the presentation of the school, clarity and just for my knowledge as well, what is the role, if any, of the PSC in terms of that whole presentation with regards to school? And then, Chairperson, there was a constant referral to accountability of the department as well as to the effectiveness of the system, and rightfully so. Chairperson, we know budgetary constraints, the challenges that goes with that. In the findings and the recommendations that the PSC does, is there any other sphere of government that are involved in those recommendations? Are there any escalation of such findings from the PSC side? Thank you, Chairperson. You are on mute, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize. I muted myself by accident. Can I just go to the first part of the report before I respond to the other requirements or the other issues that members raised subsequently to this report and to the concerns raised by the PSC? On slide 6, I just want to check my notes here. I want to get an understanding from on slide 6, 7, and 5. If we can just go to that slides. Yes, thank you very much. That slide, yeah. Can you give us an indication, just share with the committee, what does agree means, the department's respond? What is the definition of agree? And then on the previous slide, we're talking about withdrawn and close. What is the definition, the difference between a withdrawn case and a closed case? If you can just make a note of that, because that will help me get an understanding of that slide as well. And then when we're talking about the whistleblowers, obviously some of the concerns, and it would particularly to an article that I read in the Daily Maverick, I think it's the newly printed newspapers, where 35%, and that is in slide number 11, where 35% of the whistleblowers are identified. What measures has the PEC put in place to protect the whistleblowers? Because these are individuals that are willing to disclose their details or their identification, because in that article, very interestingly, that I read, a significant amount of them are now left poorer. Their careers are blocked from moving up. Some of them are left bankrupt, I think. The banks are. So what measures are the PEC, or if they have not looked into putting in place to ensure whistleblowers are protected? Because that is obviously an impediment for whistleblowers. If somebody read the article, they're going to say, I'm not reporting any crime because my career is not going to move forward. My life is not going to move forward. I will be bankrupt. There's no upmovability. And I just wanted to get understanding, and potentially what would the PSC recommend to this committee, and what do we need to put in place? Because the whistleblower legislation clearly, if you look at that article, does not make adequate provision for the protection of whistleblowers. And then on the particular case, and the commissioner didn't go into detail on the matter that must be reported to the Hawks, and he mentioned there are several of them, but on this particular matter, which leads me to another slide where he refers to, I think it's one of the last slides, there's not enough consequences or not enough people being charged, I think, to hire up in the department. I think he mentioned at level 14, 15, and 18. I think when you have that matters not being reported, who has not reported this matter? And I don't think there's enough detail on that for us to get a clear, because I think he mentioned the SGB, and in his interaction with the department, what has they done, or what is their constitutional or their obligation if at that level the matters has not been reported? And I know you indicated, Commissioner, that you might be reporting this matter, and now that you share it with us, I think the obligation is of us is also to take this further, because it just cannot be. I think you mentioned the amount 80,000 rand has been taken by individuals or used or abused by individuals, and nothing has been done by it. And then on slide 22, 23, if we can get a detailed list, because you do say, obviously, 30 days payment, the current state of affairs, and I do think that we are going to make recommendations on that, because you mentioned people say COVID-19, but it cannot just be that somebody wasn't paid because of COVID-19. What was the exact reason that they've given you? I mean, was the work not done? Was there nobody at the office to check the invoices? Because if you look at 182 invoices, although the rand amount is slightly down, I think by 17 or 20 million, it's a lot of money. If you're a small business owner and you're not being paid 300,000 or 50,000 rand, there are 4 or 5 people that you cannot get paid. So we need to, if you can just share with the committee some of those exact details. And then I think slide number 28, I think the committee will look at a resolution as to how we take that forward. And then on the other matter that you did raise, and while you respond, I'm just going to apply my mind as to the best way to take this forward, because you're also sitting in this meeting, and the individuals, they are not here to defend themselves. So the same matter that you're reporting on, it's a bit unfair for me to pass judgment now on individuals. Like you say, you were not there to present your case, and now those individuals are not here to present their case as well. So it's a bit ironic for me to make a recommendation on individuals that are here, because I've been in this parliament for 6 years, and I know the administrators, the staff members, are known for their efficiency and the ability to provide members of committees with the required documents. So it's a bit unfair for me now to say yes they did or yes they did not, because my experience, and I can only speak for myself, is they've been extremely efficient, and you're making a case here, which is obviously your experience, that all the documents was not provided to the committee. So it's a bit unfair for me now to make a resolution, because on my experience, they have been very good in the last 6 years that I've worked with them. If documentation was provided to them, they've given it to members of this parliament. And this is the first time in 6 years that I've heard that documentation was given to them and they've, by omission or commission, not given it to members of this parliament. So, like I said, let me apply my mind on how to take that forward. I'll give you the opportunity to respond to all the questions asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson and honourable members. I'm sure the Chairperson will guide me in respect of the questions if I do omit one or two. I start off then with Honourable Dagmore's question, and he spoke to the question of the lifestyle audits and the mandate of the Commission. Now, of course, as he correctly says, the Commission does not have a mandate in respect of members of the executive. That mandate, in fact, lies with the public protector. As regards, obviously, if there's a request made, and I think this was raised when the Premier first indicated that he was contemplating having lifestyle audits, this was raised with me at the time, whether we have the capacity and so on. Our capacity is very limited. We are able to do it, but we would need assistance. We struggle in respect of the audits in respect of SMS members, because there's quite a lot of documents that must be cross-checked. Everything is not, it's not an integrated system that one is working with. So we would be able to do it, but we would have to have the capacity, one, a request. And remember, we are one single commission. So it's not a decision, because it's not something within my mandate. It's not something that I can decide on. It is a question that we'd have to, as a commission in plenary, take that decision. But yes, the capability is there. We would need support in terms of getting more warm bodies to assist with that process. But yes, it is something we could do. Now, as regards to the question of conflict, and that could apply equally in respect, as correctly mentioned by Honourable Dagmore and the Premier, that could apply equally in respect of the Auditor General, Public Service Commission, the Public Protector, in the sense that as oversight constitutional bodies, we do interface with departments, we interface with individuals. However, I must say that I do share the sentiments of Honourable Dagmore, that on the face of it does not constitute a conflict of interest. Very often in our daily work, Chairperson, we interact with departments. We make findings. We make findings, adverse findings in respect of senior officials. And yet we need to continue working with HODs. We need to continue working with deputy DGs. It is a matter of function. In a particular case, your function is to play a particular role. But I don't think that equates to a conflict of interest. If I could carry on then in respect of, and that would be equally applicable to us, as I said, or public protector or the Auditor General, not one who speak on behalf of these institutions. But I carry on with what Honourable Dagmore has spoken about, and he has asked for actual reports in respect of the school governing bodies. Now, what honourable members need to bear in mind is that the Public Service Commission, unless we've commissioned a particular report, as we have done in respect of the school infrastructure, we would only become aware of challenges in a particular area if there is either a grievance or a complaint or a report to the National Anti-Corruption Hotline. And it's on the strength of this, in looking at some of the cases that we have seen in respect of the school governing body environment, that I make that I draw the conclusion that there seems to be a challenge in this area. So we have a number of matters where the school governing body is involved, and we'd be quite able to provide that to honourable members. Obviously, I don't have that with me at the moment, but I could provide that. When we speak about posts in respect of school governing bodies, it is in respect of the school governing body posts, not WCD posts. And it is a challenge when one speaks to be a bit more specific about appointments. Some schools, there just is no process. You've got a school, for example, where there's a principal with a deputy principal who is his sister, with an auditor who is his brother. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. When I talk about finances in a school environment, you ask for minutes of meetings to see, were particular expenses authorized, and you don't see it in the minutes. You have a situation where payments are authorized. They call it Section 38 payments, where staff is entitled to a additional payment. I'm talking about WCD staff, additional payments in respect of their salary. So you got the salary from the WCD, and the governing body pays an additional amount. You hear that, and in the course of investigation, you hear that a principal is given an additional payment of 40,000 Rand a month, an additional payment. And then you start questioning, how was this passed through the governing body as a budget committee? So those are the kind of challenges that we start picking up, and you sort of, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about challenges in the field of SGB. Also bearing in mind that in many communities, your SGB is responsible for governance, but bear in mind that your principal is probably the most educated person sitting in that committee. And so the question is there the capacity to govern effectively? Or are they people who are agreeing to the principle? Are they in a position to make sure that they hold accountable in the governance sphere, the school manager who is the principal? So that's the kind of things that I speak about in the governance sphere as SGBs. I move on to Honourable Murray, relating to the conflict, he says, that's emerging with Provincial PFS, no actions by the ministers, and so on. Chairperson, I must say, I hope that I haven't come across as portraying that there's a conflict with any department, with any minister, with Provincial Forensic Services. What I'm saying is that there is a challenge in terms of how departments interface with Provincial Forensic Service, which could be due to a capacity challenge because they just don't have the person power at PFS. But what I'm saying is because of this, there is a delay in how long investigations take at that level. I'm not saying that ministers are not cooperating. I am not saying that HODs are not cooperating. But I'm saying that possibly the framework is not there to support the work which involves investigation. And so a HOD may think that everything is okay because he's delegated to a particular individual. But it is not the case. We still have challenges. And we found that. I'm hoping that we've cleared some of those challenges now that we've got the deadwood in terms of investigations out. Then in terms of the lack of maintenance of schools, this report we can make available. It has been provided to the Speaker. And this is also maybe something this committee could look at, is how our reports are disseminated. We could be provided, we met with the Speaker and we provided this report to the Speaker, but we can make it available to the committee if that is the request. Again, I don't want to create a picture that there's no maintenance happening. I don't want to create the impression that there's breakdown in communications between public works and schools. The department functions in a very, very challenging environment. One of the issues that they raised with us when we did the investigation was very often our maintenance work we need to put one side. Why? Because we need to deal with the increasing numbers coming in. So we're always on a back foot in terms of building new schools. My challenge was, and I still haven't got this from the department, is what is your plan? You've got so many schools, what is your plan in respect to maintenance? But I don't want to say that there is a completely broken down relationship between the two departments. Again, the report is available and it can be quite technical, and I think we'll make that report available because I think it will give members a impression of what we are saying. Bearing in mind that we didn't look at all schools, we looked at the sample, we looked at representativity from a research point of view, and that should give some sort of picture. Now, in terms of the member, Honorable Philander, the Honorable member suggested that the chairperson take up this issue of what happened in the other committee with the speaker. I would support that. Once again, the report in respect of the education HOD was provided to the speaker, and so maybe that would be a good suggestion which comes from Member Philander. Then the second thing is the issue of grievances. The honorable member asked about the health sector grievances, and I'm going to ask at the end. I'm going to ask my provincial manager, Mr. Rockman, to speak to some of the specifics as well as the specifics related to which came up from the chair at the end. And then Member Philander also spoke about the PSC and the role in respect of the schools. Look, as I said, in respect of the schools, we did an investigation because I picked up challenges in respect of maintenance, and so I commissioned an investigation in respect of school infrastructure. So that would really be our role, and then to make recommendations to the department. We have done that now, and they gave some feedback as to some things which they agree with and some things which they do not. As regards our role raised by the Honorable Philander relating to escalation. Now, yes, where there are specific issues which require escalation, we are in a position to do so. And we do that because what happens is I'm delegated for the Western Cape Province, but we are a single commission. And so where issues are raised, and this is where departments, I think, needs to, in a sense, take us into their confidence, say, these are issues, you're raising this issue, this is a challenge, but these are the challenges we experience. And because of the interface with whatever department at the national level, we are in a position to do that because we're a national body, and there are cluster commissioners who deal with specific departments. So we are in a position to do that. As we are, for example, dealing with the issue of again, the HOD issue, because there's some interface with Department of Public Service and Administration and the recommendations they made. So yes, we are able to do that to the extent that we pick up trends, and to the extent that departments, ministers and HODs raise these issues with us, we are in a position at a national level to take up those issues. Then again, the issue, moving on to the Honorable Chairperson, the issues relating to what we call agree and withdraw and close. Mr. Rockman will speak to that. Then the question of whistleblowers. Now, the mechanism in respect of protection of whistleblowers that we as the PSC use is the opportunity for people who have complaints to raise their concerns anonymously. Unfortunately, our scope cannot go anywhere beyond that. And to the extent that people, do come and provide identifying information, even though they want to be anonymous. We go through that information, and we do then, in a sense, sanitize to make sure that the person is not identifiable. So that is really the role of the P that we can play at this stage, relating to whistleblowing and how to protect them. We cannot go further beyond that, unfortunately. Now, then there's the question of the Honourable Chairperson spoke about a specific case that we're currently busy with, where 80,000 was person confessed to taking 80,000. It's somebody confessed, and I mean, and what you asked, there was questions around that. The Prevention of Corruption, the PRECA Act, says that a manager or a person in authority is obliged to report corruption or theft where he or she can reasonably conclude that an amount of more than 100,000 rand has been stolen. And my letter to the HOD and recommendation, which then went down hopefully to the school, is to say, because this person has been employed and working with funds for more than 12 years, and there's 2 incidents where 80,000 was taken, the manager or the person in authority can reasonably conclude, even if it's not the case, but reasonably can come to the reasonable suspicion that more than 100,000 has been taken. And the Act creates an offence if that person in authority does not report. I've raised it with the HOD. The HOD was very receptive to and said he would monitor it. I went back to the HOD and I said that I'm actually saying they must report. To the extent that our PSC officials will report is that we've given a deadline, and if the school manager, the principal, or the SGB chair does not do that reporting, I am saying that is a criminal offence, and my officials are obliged to report the principal and the SGB. So that's the sort of context. So that's in terms of the PRECA Act. So it's very easy to say it's only 80,000 rand, but the Act says it is a reasonable suspicion that more than 100,000 has been taken. And I'm saying it's reasonable to have that suspicion, given that this incident occurred in one time in 2017, the person was employed more than 12 years, and the controls was not sufficient to discover that. We discovered that when we did the investigation, very preliminary, because we don't have forensic persons in our employ. So that's the context of that in investigation and that issue of reporting. So I'm waiting on the HOD in respect of that reporting as well. Yes, again, in respect of the report and efficiency, I'm not going to question the efficiency of the provincial office, of the provincial legislature staff at all. All I can say is that, because I was very concerned that my staff had possibly not provided the annexures. And while in the meeting, I checked via my emails where I was copied, and the office of the speaker was sent the documents, and the attachments were there. So let's say somewhere between the speaker's office and the members in that committee, the documents went missing. So that's where I can leave that, and I hear completely the chairperson in respect of the people are not here in the committee. But I would support what Member Philander indicated, that possibly the chairperson lies with the speaker. I think that I've covered everything, chairperson. There might be one or two that members want to follow up, or there might be one or two that you, chairperson, would say that I possibly still need to answer. So, but besides that, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Rockman to deal specifically then with
the whistleblowers. What is, yeah? Of course, Mr. Rockman must respond. Okay, Mr. Rockman, you want to continue first before I get in? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, Chair. The member asked about the grievances. The proportionally higher number with health. Of course, health has a larger proportion of public servants in the province. Yes, you might argue that education is bigger in terms of headcount, but they have educators employed under the Educators Act. And in terms of our mandate, we deal with public service service staff. She asked about the member asked about the particular substantiated matter. Just very quickly, the elements of that was a radiographer in the rural areas, where of course there were just two of them at a particular facility, needing to run a shift rotation, and the person was aggrieved about what she perceived to be an unfair schedule, and actually proposed that there be locums employed so as to bring some kind of relief in terms of demands and over weekends and having to run a long shift. In our investigation, and part of the reason why we found that substantiated was that there wasn't clear guidelines around how that scheduling should take place. And also it was quite reasonable, the proposal to have locums just to bring about some relief so that the people are not absolutely burnt out. You can imagine that in a rural setting, you know, there is that kind of risk. I think the subtext of the question around a larger proportion of cases being unsubstantiated could be that what is the level of merit in every grievance matter. So whilst from the Public Service Commission side, cases, we find that policy application in most instances, prescripts and policies applied properly by departments. Cases obviously are not as black and white as that. So whilst some of the cases might reflect statistically as unsubstantiated, in fact, part of the Commission's task is to make recommendations. Give you one example around temporary incapacity leave. Again, prescripts applied properly, policy applied properly, matter unsubstantiated, but there is this particular debt incurred by the aggrieved, and significant debt, tens of thousands. And part of our recommendation to the department, while finding it unsubstantiated, was to say, please enter into a conversation around this particular debt. The onus is on you also in terms of the time delay to take responsibility for that time delay, causing that debt to a certain extent, and therefore, you know, find some common ground, and actually to the point where consider bringing some relief in terms of calling for that debt to be repaid. Chairperson, you asked about cases being withdrawn, not being properly referred. Yes, that is such. You can imagine that aggrieved, some employees are quick on the draw, and in many instances lodge matters with us only to discover that they haven't fully exhausted the internal channels. And so in those instances, they would not be properly referred. In other instances, especially around the matters where there are interpersonal issues, victimization, whilst in midstream of our processes running, matters have resolved to the satisfaction of the aggrieved, and we, in constant contact, interaction with them, they would then indicate that they wish to withdraw the matter. So there are instances where that happens, and of course, you know, ultimately, we want to see that matters are resolved. Are there anything else, Chairperson or Commissioner?
Chairperson, that is then the responses. As I said, possibly you are aware of one or two that I might have missed. I don't think I missed any, but let me hear from you.
Thank you. I do think we are going to, as a committee, make some resolutions to some of the matters that you have raised, because I do think it's important that we do address them, and that the Public Service Commissioner should not feel that when it comes to this committee that he's being ignored. So don't worry about it. I have taken note of it, and I am making some drafting resolutions that we will take as a committee, because I do feel as the constitutional body, you're absolutely right. We have a serious role to play. We need to make sure that these matters are being addressed, because that's the purpose of you coming here, and that's why we appointed you. So don't worry about it. As Member Dagmar said, this committee has always functioned as regardless of where we come from, which political parties we come from. As a constitutional body, we've always been that a body that needs to take matters further and to make sure that these matters are addressed. Otherwise, we might as well go home. So we will deal with it. Members, is there any follow-up questions for the Public Service Commissioner? Member Douglas.
Thanks. I still seem to be having problems trying to put up my hand, but just if you hear me, I'd just like a quick follow-up, because I think, you know, I would agree that it would be with the proposal that you engage with the speaker. But all I'm saying is that I think our committee, even though I agree with Member Philander that, the other parties to this are not here, but there needs to be an opportunity where, this issue can be aired properly, because it's an issue that does concern me, that is still unresolved. And in that regard, I would just like to ask the Advocate Goosen that in regard to this issue of the extension of the HOD's contract, have you as the Commission heard back from the DPSA in the province? And you said there's some other court case happening. I don't know if you said tomorrow, and the fact that this matter has not yet been resolved, and the matter is now being cited in a court case. So can you just give me clarity about that? Because I think, Chair, we should be concerned about this, and I think we have an interest as a committee to get this matter resolved either way. So could we just have a 2-minute summary of where we are on this issue from the perspective of the Public Service Commission? Where are we with this issue? Is it tied up in court? What's the DPSA saying? And what is your proposal as to how we just resolve this issue now?
Chairperson, can I respond, Chairperson?
You can respond, but we've just had your view where you said the matter was discussed in another committee where you were not present.
Yes.
So we're going to commit the exact same crime that you just said somebody else has committed. And I mean, two wrongs don't make a right. I'm going to allow you to give you a short input on this matter, but I would not want us to do exactly the same thing that you've just accused another committee of doing.
Just
it would be
information,
very unfair. And hence I said, remember Dagmar? And I'm still speaking.
Sorry.
Hence I said we will make recommendations as a committee on the way forward, because we cannot do exactly the same thing you've just accused another committee of doing. It'll be grossly unfair. And we will, as a committee, make that recommendation to ensure that we do justice to this report that you've now indicated that you have submitted, and at that committee, of which I was also at, by the way, as a member of this legislature, that there were no documents. And I cannot now say, because like I said, has been a member of the legislature for now going 7 years now, that the staff members has been very diligent in giving whatever has been provided to them, or whatever has been ATC'd at minimum, of which all of us as members get also, by the way. And the moment that the staff members ATC document, it gets through to us. So somewhere it got lost in the system, and we need to find out why and why not. And that's why I concur with Member Philander that the first authority would be the speaker to say, this is the document that was submitted. This has not gotten to us. Whatever got lost in the system, a bug, whichever way, I'd be far more comfortable doing that way than starting saying staff member X or staff member X didn't do this or didn't do that. And I think that'll be grossly unfair to anyone that has served this legislation. It's certainly that I've been here for 7 years, has been diligent in getting documents to this, and I would not want to cast that aspersion on anyone, including anyone of your office that document could have not been attached to an email, for example. And I would not want to venture into that. So remember, Dagmar, please allow me to finish. Because
when you finished,
I always have given you the same respect when you're at this committee, so please show me the same respect to finish. So I would like us to be very cautious and mindful when we venture into that, but I would like you to respond, Advocate Goosen, but I would like you to be mindful of the same matter that you have raised, to also have the same courtesy, even if people did not afford it to you, to at least that you have that courtesy for them. Can you respond? Member Dagmar, do you want to give input before Advocate Goosen respond?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just that I couldn't get the hand up. I was not intending to undermine you as Chair, but just to say, it's simply the perspective of the Public Service Commission, as I asked. It's not a debate about the issue, it's just for our information. And then secondly, I'd agree with your summary about what Member Philander has proposed, and also just when you engage the speaker, just to ask for clarity as to why the PSC was not invited. The documentation is one side of it, the other side of it, why they were not invited. Thanks.
Okay, Advocate Goosen, you can respond for that. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. I'm not an advocate. I don't want to get into trouble.
That's what I thought, because that's what I thought actually, because the whole time we're calling you Mr. Goosen, and now member Doug was throwing in advocate. I don't want us to end up.
At one stage. I was at one stage. I'm an attorney at this stage, a non-practicing attorney. Okay. So, yes, Chairperson, I'm very mindful of what you mentioned, and therefore I will not be going into the specifics, but just in terms of where we are. So, at this stage, as far as the Department of Public Service and Administration is concerned, we had not engaged them because the view was that my decision, despite what they had said, that I come to the correct conclusion. I know that provincial government, and it was said, has engaged them and that they are waiting on a response. So we have not engaged them. We only engaged them in order to advise, because they told us, maybe I shouldn't say this, but we didn't engage them as to what the process was in terms of the advice. We didn't engage on that. We engaged in terms of them saying that our finding was correct. So that's as far as that goes. So at this stage, there's still a recommendation on the table, and we are waiting because the department, the Department of the Premier needs to decide what it does with that recommendation. As far as the issue that I raised with the litigation that is pending, we are cited as a sixth respondent, I think, in a case where a school principal is being disciplined, and the principal has gone to the labor court to interdict his disciplinary process, and part of the relief is to say that the HOD incorrectly signed off on the charges, and for the court to hold that this report, which is attached, that his appointment is irregular based on the report that is attached to the papers. So that's where we're sitting, and that's where that comes in. And so the need, I suppose, to expedite this so that we don't have those kinds of things playing itself out.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, HOD. Member Dagmar?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner, there was one issue that I wanted just to check with you, which I didn't actually, perhaps I didn't ask him. On the issue of, I think, sick leave you mentioned, or the high level of sick leave, and I actually made a note, I must listen to the video again, 1336. And I can't remember what was a core issue, but I had made a note for myself. I see you listen to video again, 1336 to 1345. It's about 18 minutes of tape. I need to listen again, because you seem to have quite a strong view on that matter, like something, there wasn't anything, I'm going to find a slide. There wasn't.
I think you might be referring to the temporary incapacity leave.
Could be that matter, yes, because I made a note for myself. Please, Ricardo, listen to tape again, 1336 to 1345, as I normally write notes for myself. So there was something that you've raised for a reason, and that's why I made a note. What was the issue on the incapacity leave? Something to do with the department? There wasn't a lot of attention paid to it or something?
No, Chair. What I said was that that applicants, so your staff, your public servants, are incurring significant debt for temporary, because of the inefficient processes in Commonwealth. So your public servant would have exhausted their ordinary entitlement to sick leave, and so they apply for temporary incapacity leave. In terms of how the process works, once they are away from their place of employment and on temporary incapacity, but is not approved yet. So then it goes through a process where it must go to a health risk manager, and who is the outside service provider, and then therefrom it goes to the HOD and the decision made. So because the decision takes so long, this person might be at home for a month, 2 months, and now the decision comes back, we're only going to give you 5 days. And so it's 2 months worth of salary that now needs to pay. So those processes is taking too long. Yes.
So the processes need to be fine-tuned. Okay, I can make a recommendation on that. Thank you for that. And then the other matter that you've highlighted in your comment, I made a note of this, that says matters are not being vigorously pursued. And I think I made a note there on slide number 15. That's another recommendation we need to make. Are you saying that that's from the departments, or is that from the Provincial Forensic Services?
Chairperson, I think it's from the department side. The department is going to say forensic services, that it's sitting with him. But it's even matters that don't reside in terms of forensic. There are some matters, for example, it's simple. it's allegations relating to an appointment irregularity. You draw the personnel file, you draw the recruitment documentation. It's simple, and yet it's taking long.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I've got some recommendations that we will make going forward. Thank you to Mr. Goosen and Mr. Rockman, and I'm not sure who else is with you. But thank you for taking the time and for coming to address this committee. We really do appreciate it. We will now have a committee meeting where we will make recommendations on the way forward. We really do appreciate it, and thank you for your time, and wishing you all the best, you and your team. So you know we're going through a very difficult period of COVID-19, and you're still functioning, and I think that is very important for certainly for me as a chairperson of the committee, that the public service are still being taken care of, all the grievances, all the complaints. And just one matter that I would like you to take with you, the issue of sick leave, because during the period of COVID-19, people had to take sick leave, if you want to call it that, for COVID-19 and for family matters. And that's going to become a very topical issue next year and towards the end of this year, because the argument that I've picked up on social media is that really classified as sick leave? And I don't know how the department in the health or the HOD of education or the Department of Premier, how are they going to deal with that? Because an official asked me, Member of Parliament, are they going to classify this as sick leave? Because I wasn't really sick. So that I'll leave with you. And how are you going to deal with it next year or towards the end of this year? Because officials are going to say it wasn't really sick leave because it was a pandemic.
Anyway, thank you, Chair. We'll wait for the DPSA, but yeah. We'll
So I'll leave that with you to start thinking about it. You're welcome to be excused, and members, we're going to start making the resolutions as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the honourable members. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Wasima, can we just take some resolutions for members?
Chairperson, yes, I can go through some of the recommendations, and then the members can just add on if necessary.
Thank you. Wasima, did you want to read some up before I continue with mine?
Sure, Chairperson. So, Chairperson, through you, the members would like, for Nexus, they'd like a copy of the SLA, the Provincial and Nexus Agreement, the costs involved, and the documents, the bid documents. Copy of the bid documents, right?
Okay, that's with Nexus, that's fine. Members, anything else on Nexus?
No, Chair.
Nothing else on Nexus? Sorry, Wasima, apologies for interrupting you. Was there something else on Nexus?
No, Chair, no.
Okay, and let's go to the Public Service Commissioner.
Chairperson, so there was a request for the list of schools. Okay, so let me just quickly. There is a report regarding the school infrastructure. A report that was done by the Public Service Commission on the school infrastructure. Members want a copy of that. I'm not sure what the members want when it comes to the SGB reports. So if they want a report or an update or a status update, so members must just guide me.
I think what the members want is obviously in the PSC report there was a summary of some of the matters that has not been pursued, including the matter relating that the PSC might report to the Hawks, or that if the SGB do it. I think the members wanted that detailed report, because in order to make it in this report, there was another report done on those cases. So members wanted that detailed report.
The detailed report on
the cases. I'll get you the slide number. Hang on a second.
Okay, you're talking about the grievance cases, Chairperson?
No, I'll get there now.
The SGB reports.
I'll get to the slide now. Okay, what they've done on slide number 14, they've done quite a lot of cases, obviously, investigations done by the PSC, and particularly on the school governing body environment. And he's saying it's being left alone or unregulated or not monitored. So we want that investigation because that will tell us exactly where those is. Nothing is done. That's obviously the Department of Education, but he's done it specifically on the SGB environment. So we want that report.
Okay, Chairperson. Then, Chair, there was 2 reports that were submitted to the Speaker's office, and I'm not sure if the members, if you want to make a recommendation just to obtain those 2 reports, the list of schools where maintenance was not being done, and then there was another report. The report was provided to the Speaker regarding the HRW education. So those 2 reports are the Speaker's office, and that the committee can just obtain those reports from the Speaker's office.
Yes, please, if we can get the full report, including annexures, because there's specific mention made to annexures that was not submitted to an...
Past 8 maand vir die trays, as dit soveel is.
Sorry, who's speaking?
Member Philander.
Okay,
My apologies, Chair, members.
Member Philander. So we want that full report, including annexures, because there seems to be an indication that there was not annexure submitted to another committee. And yes, so we'd like that.
Okay, Chair, and then the list of the 30-day payments regarding the transport and public works and education.
Yes, please. We want the details on that, because obviously it's a concern to me, and I know it will be a concern to everyone, that small businesses are not paid within 30 days. And if we can just get the reasons why, we understand COVID-19, and it'll be in his report. So we need that report, please. Because I presume every department gave him a reason as to why it was not done. So we want that report, including the reasons why it was not done.
Chairperson, and then the members can just give whatever else they wanted to add on to the recommendations.
Chairperson.
Member Dagmar, I see you here.
Yeah. Thanks. I think we should just try and formulate the wording. You know, I made the initial proposal of a joint meeting, then Member Philander proposed that you speak to the Speaker. I wonder if we can just agree, and this is my proposal, that the committee mandates yourself as the chair to establish from the Speaker, you know, whether the Public Service Commission was invited to the education hearing or not, whether the issue of the extension of the HOD's contract was discussed, and secondly, what documentation was received by the Speaker's office, and whether that documentation was provided to members of the committee. I mean, it's just basically, I think we're asking you to follow up on those matters and then give us a response.
Okay, what I perhaps can do, Member Dagmar, because I presume there were other members on the Education Committee there at that meeting, and I do not know what questions they asked, why the Public Service Commissioner or not. I mean, I can't speak for other members. I think there were 7 members at that meeting. It'll be, you know, I can't speak for them. But what I will do, sorry, I see another went up, Member Philander.
No, it's just the resolution after you finished your.
Okay. What I will do, obviously, I'll write to the Speaker, like I said, and I think Wasima has read that resolution early on to find out what documents has been submitted, and I will just find out from the Speaker, I mean, from the chairperson of the Education Committee, just to give me a briefing or feedback as to what happened and what the minutes and the resolutions of that committee was, because I suspect they obviously would have made some resolutions and minutes, and I will table that in this committee meeting. Member Dagmar?
Yeah, Chair, sorry, the specific issue was also whether, and maybe you can establish that from the chair of the committee, whether the Public Service Commission was invited, and if not, what were the reasons for not inviting them?
Yeah, Chairperson, I can't interrogate other committee chairpersons.
Then to the Speaker, then. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. We just want to find out.
But we will get the minutes of the meeting from that standing committee. And I mean, you've got also, Member Dagmar's got members of the committees as well. But I will definitely get the minutes and the resolutions of that committee. Members, sorry, I've got my meeting is 30 minutes overdue, my next meeting.
Chairperson?
Member Philander, can we go quickly?
Yes, quickly, Chair. Chair, just in terms of the escalation of findings and recommendations, can we just get a report from the Commission of such?
Member Dagmar, I do apologize. I've missed the last part. Can you say again? Sorry, Member Philanda, I apologize. Yeah.
Member Dagmar Philanda, sorry.
Sorry, Member Philanda, I missed the last part.
Chairperson, you'll remember the question was posed to the Commission in terms of findings and recommendations, and there was a positive answer to that there are instances where it is done. So can we possibly get a report from the Commission as to what queries then were escalated to another level or sphere of government, please?
Okay, thank you. Wasima, did you capture that?
Yes, Chairperson. Just
Thank
the
you.
minutes and the...
I'm coming now, coming. Okay, anything else, members, that we have not captured?
Nothing from my side, Chair.
Members, can we deal with the minutes at the next meeting?
That's fine, Chairperson.
Thank you. Anything else, members?
Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Klejo, Member Lekker, thank you for joining the committee today. Wasima, we will deal with the minutes at the next meeting.
No problem, Chair.
Thank you, members. This meeting is adjourned.